You keep denying yourself, you overwork yourself constantly, you never say no, you don't have boundaries. You're kind of telling your body, like, I'm not going to stand up for you. You're not worth it. And then the body kind of inverts and you start to see mysterious autoimmune conditions. Hey everyone, Dr. Riley here, and welcome to the Wellness Dojo podcast, where we provide real solutions to real health and wellness problems. Today's episode is episode 13, Hormones and Weight Loss, where we get into the specifics of 4 crucial hormones that affects your weight. We talk about the signs to look for if they're out of balance, how to test for them, and simple strategies to heal. We hope you enjoy this episode. Let's go.
All right, welcome to the show.
Welcome to the show.
Good to see you, man.
Good to see you too.
How are you doing today?
Yeah, not bad. Had a little bit of an interesting morning.
Okay.
I think I should tell you the story.
Okay, let's hear it.
Okay, so the first of the month rolled around, and I started getting all these email notifications that, like, your monthly subscription service could not be charged, and this couldn't be renewed, and you're no longer a member. We're sorry. And I was like, whoa, what the heck is going on here? And my credit card got a like some sort of an overseas cash withdrawal, so it got frauded and it got shut down, which is like, okay. And so I wake up and I'm like, okay. So first of all, I ordered a new card, like called the bank, like ordered a new card. It came. I put it in the junk drawer, which is where I put these things. And then this morning I'm like, okay, so it's not something I want to spend my time on, but I've got to like contact all these companies, give them my new card number and all that, and get this sorted and get my payments, because it's my business credit card, so it's like all of my like memberships and all these for being an indie. And so wake up pretty motivated, like pretty ready to go to the junk drawer to try to find the card, and it's not in there. And I'm like ripping apart the junk drawer, basically put it all over the counter, can't find it. I'm like, okay, well, if it's not here, it's like in this other place in the house. It's upstairs in the closet on the rack where I sometimes put mail. Go there, it's not there. I'm like, okay, well, it's got to be in my file folder. Like, and so I went around the house like 5 times, wasn't anywhere. And remember, like, I have this list of things to do. I'm supposed to call all these. That's what I'm supposed to do, and I can't even find the card. So I call the bank and I say, hey, I know you guys sent me a new card. I just can't find it anywhere. And they said, okay, that's okay. Let's just start with the card you have. And I relay the number, go to my wallet, open it up. It's got the old expiration, everything. Relay it to them, and they tell me that is the new card. And it has the number changed, but the expiration doesn't. And so what I did is I opened the envelope when it came. I must have like put it in my wallet and been like, I'll make a purchase with this, I'll activate it, or at least I'll have it somewhere super safe. This was past Riley. I'll have it somewhere super safe for me to find. And so anyways, I don't know, like 3-hour ordeal after calling the bank, and then she laughed at me, and then I totally deserved it. Yeah, she laughed at me. She's like, that's the card we sent.
That's hilarious.
Like, yep, the CVV on the back and all that, like that's it. So yeah, good start and ready to go.
Yeah, that's awesome.
No, I did solve everything by the end of it.
That's good. That's what's important, right? Is you found a solution, even if it was a little bit ridiculous.
Yeah.
I've been there before. Like, sometimes your brain just gets so scattered where you set something down, and then like 2 minutes later you don't remember where you put it.
Yeah,
like that kind of thing.
I think that's the mark of it's just an overburdened mind, just too much going on up there, and yeah, that was definitely a Riley moment. Then now you know what it's like to live with me. Well, a Riley moment's like you wake up motivated, you get all set up, you have these 5 things you want to do, and you can't even do step 1 because like something's missing, and so you run around the house all stressed out. And yeah.
Well, I can kind of relate, because I'm the type where it's like, okay, I wake up, I'm like, okay, this is what's super important today, but then like 5 other things pop in my brain of like, I got to do this and this and this too. And then all of a sudden my brain, for some reason, decides, okay, well, step 5 maybe should be first now. So then I go to step 5 and then work my way back or something. Yeah. And then you forget by the end of the day, you're like, oh yeah, that really important thing I needed to do. Maybe I should try and get that done tomorrow, I guess, first thing.
Yeah. Well, and like my solution was, open up the phone and so link your notes with the computer and with your phone, so whatever you have available, it all links up. But I will take my phone out of my pocket, I'll see a couple messages, one might be important that needs my attention, and then I'll like go into that message, reply, and then be like, why did I what was I going to put in my phone again? Like, what was that note? And then it's just gone. So yeah.
Well, it's an interesting segue into our conversation today, because we're going to talk about hormones today, and that's a good stress example of like this panic-induced rushing around the house trying to find this card and stuff. I'm sure your cortisol levels were raised a little bit. They were
panic-induced, caffeine-induced. Stress, artificial stress levels. Yeah, and how they can impact weight loss and weight gain. However, you're trying to angle that, but
yeah, I think it's super important. And you hear people talk all the time about like, you got to rebalance your hormones, you got to do all this stuff for weight loss and stuff like that. But I think a lot of people kind of will hear that and dismiss it because it can seem intimidating. It can seem kind of complicated, and you don't, if you don't have a lot of knowledge on hormones and stuff like that, then it is very intimidating for somebody.
Yeah, but there is good news on balancing your hormones. A lot of positive lifestyle changes that you make will have multiple downstream effects on multiple hormones all at the same time. Yeah. So it is complicated if you want to really look into any one hormone, but it's not complicated on the treatment side unless you have some sort of condition, something severe. Sometimes it requires medication, but other than those exceptions, there's a lot that you can do that's just going to be good for your overall general health. And I keep we're going to talk about a few hormones today. We're going to talk about insulin. We're going to talk about thyroid hormones. We're going to talk about cortisol, and we're going to talk about these two hormones in the digestive system that have to do with hunger signals and being full signals. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But in researching for this again, which I've already done the research for, I do it again because I'm like, am I missing anything? The advice it's just all seems the same on how to balance them and raise them. And at a certain point, you just have to go, this is what it is. Yeah. As a human being, for balancing some of these hormones, this is how you do it. There's no esoteric knowledge about this. I think we're always trying to reach and look for something mysterious, some sort of tricks, this and that. It's like our minds are programmed towards the novel and towards discoveries and things like that. But when it comes to balance in the body, there's certain things that the body wants repeatedly and reliably. It's sleep, it's stress management, it's movement and exercise, it's proper nutrition. I mean, it's
really basic. Like,
yeah.
When you think about it, it's like the basic necessities of life. It's like food, movement, sleep. Like, if you want to like really narrow it down, and stress, right?
Yeah,
and those three categories impact stress pretty majorly.
Right. And
but sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but you said something in the last episode that really stuck with me as well, when we were talking about industry myths and stuff, and you said like, people don't want to hear, it's kind of like on the unsexy truth about like, what works. And like you said, like, people don't really want to hear it, but it's like the old tried tested methods that we know work, that it's just not like a fun new thing that people want to hear about, but it's like these old things, just like we know what works. It's just kind of hard to implement them, and that's where the struggle comes from, right?
Yeah, and I think people would be amazed to realize through experience and through practice just how much better things can get with a few tweaks that, like I think I mentioned this before about people say, I sleep. Yeah, sure, I sleep 7 or, I think I sleep enough. I don't want to hear that I need 8 hours of sleep. Yeah. Or, I eat pretty good. Like most of the people that I see do eat pretty good. But if you want to bring it to that next level, you wouldn't believe there's how much room there is for improvement still. Even if you're eating pretty good, I exercise throughout the week. It's like there's so much more room for improvement there that they may not realize still within any one category. And the way that I think about it is relay it back to myself and cooking, right? So cooking is something that we all do, that we're all okay at it, but if you get into it a little bit, there's these small changes and tweaks when it comes to cooking that you can make your food restaurant quality at home with a few different things that you learn. And you can't believe that, it's the same person cooking that stuff. And the same is applied to like nutrition. You can't believe how much better that you can actually get, or exercise if you start to approach exercise differently, or make sure that you get the right variety, or you change your training up to get over those plateaus and things like that. So we know these things. They're basic because they're only basic because we've heard them repeatedly. But what isn't basic is applying them into practice, going from amateur to professional.
Yeah.
That's not basic.
Yeah, and finding a sustainable way to do it, right? Because I think that's like the big difference. Again, what we talked about in the last episode is people know that they need to make these changes, but like, how do you do it in a way that's not like so dramatically different than what you've been doing that you can't sustain it? It's like finding those approaches. And so we'll talk a little bit about those things today too. I think.
Yeah. So we're talking about more so, I find more people are tending to want to try to lose weight than put it on.
Yeah.
With the put it on, you're either looking at like bodybuilders, football players. There's very like sports without weight classes where you want to be heavier.
Yeah. Yep.
Or people who have had disordered eating affect their life and they're trying to put on weight and things like that. But almost exclusively, I'm sure you run into the same thing. It's about people wanting to lose weight.
Yeah, most frequently. Even sometimes people who maybe don't need to lose weight are often looking to lose weight.
Yeah,
right?
I see that sometimes too.
But I think it's helpful for people to understand, like, if for people who are gaining weight and they feel like they're doing all the right things, right? It's also helpful for them to understand, like, well, why might I be gaining weight when I feel like I'm doing all the right things? Like, I feel like I'm in a calorie deficit. I feel like I'm exercising more. Like, what's going on? Why am I gaining weight? And
there we go.
I know a big one. If you want to start, like, do you want to start with like cortisol and stress? Yeah. Okay. Why don't you take it away first with cortisol and stress, on like how that tends to impact weight gain, weight loss, that type of thing.
Yeah. Cortisol and stress is a very interesting one on weight, because what we call acute cortisol, which is like quick, short term, your body's releasing it when you need it.
Fight or flight kind of response.
Yeah. Running around your house looking for your credit card that's in your wallet already for 2 hours. Interestingly enough, so what it does is cortisol can actually like mobilize glucose, stored glucose in the body. It can make you more energetic, which is the opposite of weight gain, right? You're thinking like, oh, that's probably like improving my metabolism. It's making me energetic. And so why cortisol is so confusing is because it does that in the short term, but long-term repeated, it starts to have a different effect on the body. And that's what people have to realize, is that there's a different effect from when you need it to long-term unmitigated stress in your life. And what starts to happen is it's something like there's receptors on your fat cells. They start to get expressed more than in just short term. And so cortisol starts to affect those receptors on the fat cells, and the downstream effect of that is to create more fat cells over time. And so that's why when people might say stress puts on weight, it's accurate to a certain degree, but it's long-term, unmanaged stress that starts to put on weight. And then once those cortisol receptors are expressed more on those on the fat cells in and around certain portions of the body, it's like that kind of like gut adiposity, the gut fat cells tends to be on men, and then the hips on the women and things like that. There's a certain truth to that. And well, why the heck does the body do that? I think that the body, it tends to do really interesting things in response to stress as defense. And so it produces cholesterol over time with enough stress. And why does it do that? Well, you need cholesterol for certain hormones. Maybe it's trying to produce more estrogen, like testosterone or something like that. And and then so that's essentially like the difference between the two. So and then so it's like, well, what do you do about it?
Yeah, and it's interesting because that's, I think, where people get confused, right? Because people will read like, oh, stress is what's causing me to gain weight, but then they'll also read, well, hold on a second, because stress isn't bad. Stress is actually good. Like, you need stress, and like you need these stress hormones in your body. So then people go like, I'm so confused. Like, I don't understand like which one is right?
Yeah.
Do I need stress? Do I not need stress? Like, and like most things that we're talking about today, it comes down to balance, right? And I think you described that really well. It's like, yeah, there's a level of stress in your body that does, like, it will use the sugar in your body for energy and stuff like that, and it will mobilize fat cells and stuff like that. But when it becomes too much and when it becomes unmanaged, that can lead to, more serious things.
Yep. Yeah. And more serious things. There, like, I think we've touched on this before. Dr. Gabor Mate has his own theories that enough stress in your life, but also like denying yourself over time just starts to send some really poignant signals to the body that and this is getting a little out there, but it's like you keep denying yourself, you overwork yourself constantly, you never say no, you don't have boundaries. You're kind of telling your body, like, I'm not going to stand up for you. You're not worth it. And then the body kind of inverts and you start to see mysterious autoimmune conditions start to appear later in life when it's not there in the family. And so that is his theory. Like, some people love it and some people don't love it. I would say after reading the book, I was pretty convinced. Yeah. That there's something to it.
Yeah. And then there's more, I don't know if it's like short term or more, real life kind of results too from stress, where, as most people know, when you're stressed out, like, what do? You usually eat more. Yeah. Right. And you said, you also mentioned something in one of our previous episodes about that connection on, like, how when we are stressed, when that fight or flight response is happening, one way to ease that is to eat, because when you eat something, your digestive system kicks in. You cannot necessarily be in that fight or flight anymore, because now your body goes into rest and digest. Right. And before you had said that, I never really made that connection, and that's that's a big thing here when we're talking about weight gain, weight loss. Like, when you're stressed, it's a natural reaction to want to eat so that you can. So if you're overeating frequently, then reducing your stress is probably something that's going to help. And that's something I see a lot. Yeah,
you're right. So it's beyond that physiological effect of increasing fat cells due to cortisol, the stress hormone, over time. It's that being stressed out might also induce other behaviors that can lead to weight gain. And so, you eat because you're in that fight or flight, and then when you eat, it almost forces your body to go into that other version of our nervous system, which is the rest and digest. And there's literally different nerve fibers for each type of nervous system. The like that, the fight or flight, the stress, or the rest and digest. And so you're activating these different nerve fibers depending on what you're doing. And so that's one thing. The other is, these lifestyle changes start feeding into each other a little bit more too. If you have disordered sleep, or if you didn't have a good sleep the night before, you're much more likely to engage in eating foods that are like high sugar types of foods, and like refined, quick carbohydrates. You're looking for quick energy. You're looking for quick relief. You're tired. You want something to bring you up. And so it also increases your chances of eating poorer foods, and this has been studied, or more of them. Poorer foods and just more food.
Yeah. I know too, from looking into the research and stuff like that, that even just like your decision-making process is totally skewed when you are short on sleep. Like, you are literally more likely to make more like impulsive decisions when you've had a lack of sleep. Yeah, well, you don't have the energy to make good decisions because you're running on less brain power. So you're going to go to what is quick and convenient and makes sense. Yeah, and I mean, that's the food and sleep portion of it. There's also just a sleep and increased cortisol portion of it too. Poor sleep increases your stress. It increases your irritability. So this is why when you can search any hormone and how to balance it, and it'll say lose some weight, get more sleep. Like, it'll just say the same thing, but this is why, because they're all interrelated. Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating, and stress is something we've talked at length about, and something that we could talk at more length about, I'm sure. But what are some of the other hormones? So we know cortisol.
Yep.
We understand kind of the impact of that and what that can do for weight gain.
Yep.
To a certain degree. What else is there here?
I want to talk about insulin today.
Okay.
Yeah, so insulin is the one that we hear about a lot when it comes to diabetes. It's, the condition and the impact of insulin really go hand in hand. But what insulin does is it just allows your body to accept the carbohydrates, the glucose molecules, and turn it into energy. So it facilitates that process. Yeah. You eat some carbs, your body has to turn it into energy somehow. And it's, of course, there's more to it. There's, B vitamins helps with that, and there's a bunch more. But really, insulin is so key. And so if insulin isn't working properly, if it's not breaking down the sugars in your blood, what's happening to them? They're just circulating. They're circulating around. And the sugars in your blood wreak havoc on the body. That's why people with diabetes lose their eyesight, they lose limbs, various things with their organs can happen. It's the blood, it's the blood sugar content circulating around. And it's those, you imagine if there's, glucose molecules circulating in your blood higher than they need to be, they're a thing, they're a physical thing. They're gonna start to affect the body. So insulin, so it can become, let's say there's something called insulin resistance. And that just means that your body isn't able to utilize insulin the way that it should. And then there's insulin resistance and insulin sensitivity. They're the same thing. Insulin, you want to decrease your insulin resistance and you want to increase your insulin sensitivity. You just might see those words. Sometimes they're kind of interchangeable there. And so if you're somebody who, let's say you want to increase the way that your body's insulin functions, essentially, how do you help sensitize the insulin, which means make it work better, make it more sensitive, make it more reactive? And there's things that in the herbal world that you can look at least. There's you can look at something called berberine that has some really, really good evidence for helping control blood sugar levels. There's even cinnamon comes up in there, but of course it's not just sprinkling a bit of it, right? This is to therapeutic dose. So there are some options in the herbal world to help you with that. What else is there? There's chromium. There's a mineral called chromium that helps with insulin sensitivity, or put another way, overcoming insulin resistance. So there are supplements that you can take, but one of the best ways that you improve insulin sensitivity is exercise. Yeah, that's just it.
Yeah, back to those core kind of actions that we can take, right? And I love the way you described it, because I think so many people hear, again, insulin, like cortisol, and they think insulin is bad. Right.
Insulin's amazing.
Insulin, it has a very like all hormones, it has an important role in the body. Yeah. But I think it gets a bad name almost sometimes, because people just hear insulin, they think diabetes, or they hear insulin, they think blood sugar levels. Yeah. Right. And so you mentioned like some herbs and stuff like that, and exercise. What about sugar intake and stuff? Like, how can that impact somebody? I don't want to say resetting their insulin levels, but helping those insulin levels. If, like, for example, if you've been eating a very high sugar diet for, 2.5 years over COVID or something, and you're starting to notice some changes in your body and stuff like that. Yeah. Can people start to positively change that back and bring it back to level just through their diet?
Heck yes. It's one of the best ways to do it. One of the reasons why insulin is probably out of order is because of the continuous, extremely high spikes of insulin due to diet. So when you consume like a high sugar meal, the body goes, well, we got to deal with all the sugar. So it sends a signal down to the pancreas. It's okay, let's release some insulin. And it releases the amount in ratio to the amount of sugar and carbohydrates that you just ate. So it's trying to, so if you eat like a lot and
if you eat a bag of cookies,
Oh, yeah, I'm a little guilty of that lately. Yeah. Hey, we're real people and we admit our own faults,
Oh,
right?
hell yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I got gifted some baking, and it's just so incredible. So it's like I understand how it can happen. So when I did that, yes, my body releases insulin in kind to try to deal with that. But you don't want to be hammering on the gas pedal constantly with any hormone. The body gets tired. It does. It gets tired, and that's why insulin resistance starts to happen. The body goes, no, I've had enough of this shit. Like the insulin resistance is, it starts to kick up a little bit. Your body doesn't utilize insulin how it could, because I think it's kind of crying out in a way. It's fighting back, and this is one of the ways that it plays that out. So you can do the opposite. Yes, absolutely. So this is where we're looking at that, like the glycemic index, which is just a measure of, how much carbohydrates and maybe simple sugars and things like that are in a certain meal, and will spike your blood sugar, but also spike your insulin. And so you'll want to be looking at low glycemic index foods, and yes, and for on the course of not weeks, on the course of months minimum. Yeah.
And and I'm genuinely curious about this and what you think about this, but I know with a lot of things, the body's looking for balance, right? And so what happens in a lot of times is, for example, with metabolism, right? If you're not using your body, if your cells aren't being as active and stuff, your metabolism will kind of slow itself, because it goes like, well, we don't necessarily need to be moving as quickly and stuff like that. We don't need to be as active because we're not being utilized. And so it'll slow down to like reserve energy and stuff like that in certain senses, the same way that your muscles do, right? I have a massage therapy background. You have a background with soft tissue work as well. And so like when people will often ask, like, I don't understand why my shoulders are so tight. Well, oftentimes what can happen with the body, in a physical sense, like my pecs get really, really tight, so my shoulders pull back because we're trying to find balance. In the same way, if I don't use a muscle, it won't, like, it'll either, let's say I sat with my bicep like flexed for like an entire day. Well, what's going to happen is my body's going to go, okay, this muscle is now going to be in this position, the same way when we have our shoulders shrugged up all day at the desk, our body goes, okay, well, clearly this muscle needs to be here, so let's make it stronger there. Right? Your body like compensates. Would you say that's kind of what it's doing with insulin as well, is like when our sugar levels are so high for so long, our body just goes, okay, we're just gonna make it easier to be at this level now.
I think that's probably a temporary adaptation that it tries to do, and then over time it can't keep up with it.
Gotcha.
Yeah. The body it will, like, oh, it's such a wonderful servant to to the spirit, I guess, and it will try, but eventually it's kind of like if you and I were on a jog, and then eventually, and then we come across a wolf, and then we have to like suddenly sprint. Our bodies will do that for us for 30 seconds, but then eventually it's going to fall off. And so the same thing is going to happen with this. It's going to try to temporarily habituate. It's going to say, we need more insulin, and we need more insulin receptors, but then it just gets tired. And then that's when you start to run into these issues.
So then the problem then becomes that your body can't produce the insulin required to help bring those blood sugar levels down, and so that it stays within the blood system.
Yeah, and I would say with type 2 diabetes, so type 1 is that, first of all, we'll start with type 1. Type 1 is mostly like it's genetic. Your pancreas doesn't produce enough, from the get-go. Type 2 is it's I hate to say it, but it's almost exclusively due to personal choice and lifestyle factors. And what happens is, it's more so, I would think of it more so as like your body isn't able to utilize the insulin anymore. It's more of like a problem with receptors in the body. They're not accepting the insulin anymore. They're not utilizing it like they once did. And that's why it's called insulin resistance. The body is resistant to the insulin that's circulating around. It's not utilizing it properly anymore. It's like, no, the trust is being breached. for too long.
That's a good way to say it.
Yeah.
Yep.
I've had enough. The body's had enough. And so it starts acting out. You could say it starts defending itself in a way, but
I love the way you said it is like trust has been broken. Like that's a really, really good way to think of it for a lot of things, right? It's like your body does trust that you're going to give it what it needs.
Yeah.
And when that trust is broken, your body can kind of go like, well,
yeah, it has a say as well.
It's not going to say you're on your own, but it's going to go like, we've tried here. It's like any relationship you've ever been in, right? Where it's like there can sometimes come to a point where you're like, believe me, you have a relationship with your body, and like any good relationship, there comes a time where sometimes you say like, I've tried everything in this relationship, and now you're on your own. Like if you're not going to change, you're going to have to deal with the consequences.
You go to counseling and then come back and let's talk. And that's kind of the equivalent of you start eating better and you start looking at low glycemic foods and you start, eating better and then we'll talk kind of thing. Just like in the relationship, that one person.
I love it.
So
it's such a great analogy.
Yeah. So it's insulin, of course, is something you can test. I would say just blood sugar levels is something to be tested first. Can
we give people just a couple like different signs and symptoms? I don't want to scare people because I know signs and symptoms, they could be many things, which is why you should always, if something feels off, seek a professional, like go get help, like somebody like Dr. Riley who can help you like actually see the results, find like do the lab work, do the testing. But what are some of the things that might get people questioning? Obviously they're going to look at their diet and say like, okay, well, yeah, I've been eating high sugar, and that's going to be a big teller for you is your diet. But what are some of the signs and symptoms that people can look for?
There's 3 key ones when it comes to increasing blood sugar levels to the point where you're, let's say, pre-diabetic or something like that. And it's hyperphagia. So it's an increase in appetite. That's one, like way more than normal. It's an increase in thirst is another one. So people say, I'm hungry all the time. People don't tend to be thirsty all the time.
Yeah.
You have to try to get people to drink more water. But and then the other one is hyperuria. So just like peeing all the time.
Yeah.
And changes. So it's like thirst, hunger, urination. And those would be the 3 to look for.
Okay. And
fatigue, of course. I'll say fatigue about any condition you ask me about.
Yeah. With those signs and symptoms, again, I'm very curious about this. Is it typically like when you're seeing these types of cases, is it typically one symptom, or is it typically people have like multiple symptoms?
I would say it's multiple. Yeah. It tends to be the triad.
Yeah. Because like I know for myself, like if I drink 2 cups of coffee in a day, like I'm peeing constantly throughout the morning.
Yeah.
And I'm like I don't want people to like do something like that and think like, I think I might be pre-diabetic. Because I've actually had that thought before where I'm like, I have a small bladder, and like sometimes like my wife jokes, she's like, are you pregnant? Like you're peeing so frequently. I've had those thoughts where I'm like, oh man, I know this is a sign of diabetes, but it's like, okay, but we got to kind of like reel it in a little bit too and say like, okay, but what, like, do I have any other signs and symptoms? Like, what does my diet look like? Like, you kind of have to look at all those things as well. And
unexplainable, maybe put an asterisk and be like unexplainable, blank and blank. And
that's
then of course, if diabetes, weight gain and things like that too, I got to make sure I mention that.
Yep. Good. So insulin and cortisol, 2 ones that we've covered so far that have been really important. What else is there?
Your thyroid hormones are very important. Your thyroid hormones are your hormones of metabolism. And so if your thyroid, which is like in your neck, which, sometimes even when I like mention the pancreas, like before I really learned about it, because you can't see it, it seems like it's this far away thing, but I could almost just reach across and poke it. It's just kind of behind your liver there.
How many times have I told you not to poke my pancreas?
Been through this.
We've been through this, Dr. Riley. Stop poking my pancreas.
I'll poke your thyroid instead.
Yeah, poke my thyroid instead.
So your thyroid's like, it's easy to find on me because I kind of have the prominent point off my Adam's apple here, off the cartilage. So that's where your thyroid is. It's in your neck. That's, if you're ever curious where it is, I could actually palpate it properly. And anyways, so
tickle the thyroid.
Yeah, I mean that's the new thing. Instead of poke the pancreas,
tickle the thyroid.
Tickle the thyroid. So when the thyroid's functioning properly, the brain releases. It's kind of like the foreman releases a chemical down there and says, hey, we need a little bit more metabolism. Can you make some more metabolism hormones? And then the body takes some iodine and a couple other things, amino acids, and makes thyroid hormones. And then the thyroid hormones circulate around the body and they promote metabolism, which is essentially, it's just the production of energy. I know it's not exactly that, but just for practicality's sake, it's like cells just going through some sort of process, normally producing energy at the end. Energy, oxygen, water, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And so if that's out of whack, you have to think of what the opposite is. So if they're low, then what's happening? Well, things slow down. You will notice constipation. You'll notice that you have an intolerance to cold because you are cold, because you're not producing as much energy. And you might find that your hair is kind of coarse and brittle, and there's some other signs. There becomes like a shininess of the skin. There's some other signs that can happen if you're low in those hormones, but you can also be high in those hormones, and that's not fun either. I've had patients who are high in those hormones. And so if like you're thinking too much metabolism, and I just say this because people might think, well, great, how do I increase my... No, you don't want this. That creates anxiety. It creates like high heart rate. That's not fun either. Trust me. So you want them to be in balance. But if we're talking about weight loss, weight gain, wow, are these ever significant? Because they can cause weight loss or they can really impact weight gain. And I think what I see a lot more in people coming to me and trying to explore what's going on is that their thyroid hormones, the active hormones, are low. And so their metabolism is low.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so like obviously things that would impact that would be a lack of movement. I would think like just a low nutrient diet. So eating like fast food a lot and stuff like that, where people aren't, again, we're talking about metabolism. It's your body, your body's ability to go and like take these nutrients, break them down. Like it's your body having a purpose. So if your body doesn't have much purpose, then I could see that really impacting that.
Yeah, like you definitely get into the realm of autoimmune conditions when it comes to the thyroid, because there are certain things in the body that your body can create that literally destroy the cells in the thyroid, and that's something called Hashimoto's. Is the hypo rhymes with low, so just kind of think low thyroid hormones. And then on the other side, on the hyper side, is something called Graves that like Missy Elliott had. I can't remember. There's been a couple like pop culture figures.
It's a well-known
figures that have had it, and that's what Graves is. In case anyone's wondering, now you know it's actually an increase in metabolism. But not fun. Again, high heart rate, constant feelings of anxiousness and like something's wrong. So can certain lifestyle factors affect your thyroid hormones? I think, you'd have to say yes.
But in most cases that you see, it is something that's happening kind of behind the scenes that maybe they haven't had as much control over?
Well, there's two. So good question. There is something called, let's pick on hypo, the low, for one.
Okay.
So there's something called clinical hypothyroidism. You need all the lab values to come back positive. You have that thing that's destroying your cells. But then I think more to your question is there's something called subclinical, which just means you have the symptoms. We can't make a diagnosis based off of the lab work, but you kind of treat it similarly from my perspective.
Okay.
So the answer is yes. It would manifest as something called subclinical hypothyroidism.
Yeah, and if people are confused about that, like I think essentially, like most things, like if you want to try and set yourself up, put yourself in the best position to succeed or to counter these things, right? When we're talking about like Graves and stuff like that, like people might be more genetically predisposed for like having these different diseases and stuff like that, but you can still take action to do like the best that you can do to put yourself in the best position to either work yourself through that disease or that sickness or whatever. Like, so what we're saying is there's certain things that you might not be able to control necessarily, like stop from happening to your body just simply through like exercise and diet, but you can put yourself in the best position possible to deal with those things and to possibly counter those things or stop them. Right?
Yep.
Is that fair?
Oh yeah, that's fair. That's more than fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that one, it's really important. I like to mention it because it's one that's commonly tested for. It's easy to test for. You may have been tested for it and you don't even know it by your doctor already. So it's just like some of these hormones are a little bit more difficult to test for. They take some you have to go through a specialized lab testing company that's private, that's a few $100 to do, one kind of hormonal test. But the thyroid and the thyroid panel, which it's the multiple markers you have to look at, very common, very easy. And you can, just by testing 3 markers, you can pretty much make a definitive diagnosis. Yeah, so that's why that one's important to mention too. Not only is it extremely impactful, it's also easy to test for and detect.
Yeah, and I think a really good, like, almost like note that people can make, like a bookmark from this section is like thyroid. When you think thyroid, think metabolism, right? So like if you are noticing signs and symptoms that relate to like energy levels and metabolism, stuff like that, a lot of times, and even like you said, weight gain, weight loss, like that type of stuff, like you can, like a good place to start might be thinking, maybe I should test for thyroid. Like maybe I should see how my thyroid is doing.
Yep, especially if you have some of those symptoms that I mentioned earlier, like the cold intolerance, onset of constipation, you've noticed a difference in your hair or nails, it's time.
Can that affect like your hair turning gray and stuff like that too?
I don't know about that.
More just like the texture of it?
Yeah, more of like the texture, like kind of dry and coarse, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Which again could be so many different things, right? Like
right, it could be that it's minus 30 outside, which it may be where we are.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty brutal right now. But that's that's what you get for living in Alberta and Canada.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, and then so I want to just wrap this up by talking about a tandem of hormones. And one is called Ghrelin. So the Ghrelin gremlin is your hunger hormone. It's the one that's like in your stomach and it's like, feed me.
Yeah.
Right. I think
that's a good way to remember that.
I think everyone probably, if you have to study for it, makes that association. I certainly did right off the bat. So Ghrelin is the Ghrelin gremlin. It's your hunger hormone. And it says feed me more. And I think it's just developed and produced and released like by your stomach cells. And so obviously there's some implications if you eat a meal and ghrelin is still high, and they have found that with the overweight population in studies. So that's one of the reasons why they eat and they're still hungry. You might say, just control yourself. It's like it's still hormonal. Yeah. They're getting signals, from their body saying you still need more food, which is that's a big pillar to surmount. That's a tough one. And then on the opposite side, there's one called leptin, and leptin is your satiety hormone, meaning that it sends signals that says we're full. So the food has already leapt in to your body, and you're full. So that's ghrelin, the gremlin, and leptin, right? And so
these are like such like biology studying things.
Yeah,
like
cue cards.
Yeah, I remember it's coming up with all these different things to remember things.
Yeah.
So excellent.
Yeah. So these two they do in a sense work in tandem synergistically. They're produced by different portions of the body, and so it's not completely accurate, but you can think of it that way. That and so Ghrelin isn't bad. You need hunger signals. In patients who are have anorexia, their ghrelin it's theorized is low, right? And so you can always see a low and a high when it comes to these hormones, and devastating effects on the mind and on the body. And so in like the anorexic population, you would want to try to raise it. You might be able to help influence it with zinc supplementation and things like that. But anyways, so that's the other two that are definitely worth mentioning, because it's like it's your hunger signals, right? If you have eaten a meal, you want your leptin to take over because the food's already leapt in, and you want it to say, yeah, we're good, thanks for the meal, and that's that. But we're talking about hormones and weight gain today, so I would imagine that it seems to be more so high ghrelin instead of low leptin from what I was looking at.
Are they kind of like protagonist, antagonist as well, where kind of similar to like a bicep, tricep, where if one is high, if one is flexing, then the other one has to be relaxed?
I would assume that there is some sort of a balance that the body enacts for that.
The body does not typically shoot out both at the same time. It's like either your body's pumping out ghrelin or your body's pumping out leptin.
No, it should be like that. Yeah. And the only reason I hesitate is because ghrelin's produced by stomach cells and leptin is produced by fat cells. So just kind of different places and stuff. But yes, you're right.
They typically communicate.
Yep.
Yeah,
they should be. Yeah, so this one is a little bit tougher to test for, and like it can be done again, a little bit more specialized lab companies. I probably have to open an account with one I don't even have an account with, because there's so many other good ways to test for like what's going on in the body. You can almost assume that if you're having issues with weight loss or you're obese or something like that, you can almost assume that ghrelin's high.
Yeah, or if you're constantly feeling hungry, like you're never feeling satisfied and satiated, right? Then it's a pretty good assumption. Yeah. Like on the other side of that too, if you're never hungry, you could probably assume that might be low, the leptin might be increased, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's just kind of an interesting thing to know. When I was like, I can eat so much, it's crazy. And when I was younger, like my parents used to think that I was missing the full signals from my body. Like I was, and they didn't have a science background, but that was there.
I believe the non-scientific term is like, where are you putting that? Yeah. Are your legs empty?
Empty leg syndrome. Yeah, I still have a bit of that for sure. But yeah, so now I realize that there is a satiety signal that comes from the body, that comes from the fat cells, that says we're good. And so how do you balance ghrelin and leptin? The same way as you balance everything. I was like, I've missed something. I was looking at this morning. It's like, how do we do this? It's the same thing. It really is. It's the same way as we've been talking about.
And like one thing that I work with my clients is like mindful eating strategies. Oh yeah. And one of the things that I'll often tell them in relation to these hormones is that if you are eating really quickly or not mindfully, then sometimes what can happen is your body, like you go through the digestive process too quickly, and so your body actually doesn't have time to properly release the hormones like on schedule. And so like this is more short term in terms of like people overeating. So like you look at like Thanksgiving, Christmas dinner, like all these different things where people are typically eating to the point where they just feel sick. Part of the reason that happens is because you've eaten so quickly and so distracted with like conversations or maybe watching TV, eating that bowl of popcorn, watching a movie, and you get to the end and you're like, oh, I just feel disgusting. Part of the reason that's happening is because you haven't paid attention. You've eaten so quickly, your body hasn't had time to tell you, like, to release the hormones that say you're full. So then by the time all that food has entered your gut and is starting to digest, now your body sees it all. Your body's working so hard with it, and it's just like pumping out leptin like crazy, being like, whoa, we're full. Yeah. And that's where you start to feel disgusting and sick, and you're like, whoa, what did I do?
Yeah.
Right?
And there is a delay. What have you heard for how long it is?
I can't remember.
I've heard 15 to 20 minutes. Okay. And I think that was coming from some decent sources. I think we've tried to look into this.
And I think that's kind of where the myth of like you can't like wait 30 minutes before you go swimming and stuff like that. I think that's part of where that myth comes from. I think it's also partly just like mom's wanting you to stick around and do the dishes before you run off and go swimming or something. But I think that's kind of part of where that comes from too, is like let your body fully digest for half an hour first, right?
Oh, I love that strategy. Yeah, because if you start like, and this is the hard thing about just having an 8-hour work day, is you're like kind of constantly under pressure. Yeah. You're eating at your desk, the body goes, finally, it's a meal. We're going to rest and we're going to digest this. And then, but you got like your email on and, the phone rings and all of a sudden you're back into stress mode and the body's like, wait, I thought we were digesting. You do that.
Interesting.
This is the type of thing. You do that enough over time, all of a sudden, you have quote unquote unexplainable new digestive symptoms. The food isn't, you're not digesting properly. You're getting constipated. You're getting bloated. I believe that's just another example of over time. It's like the trust has been breached so many times with your body. If you're eating at your desk and not taking any time for yourself and kind of eating as you're working, we have never done that in human history. I don't think we've ever done that. Meals were something that were almost like
cherished.
Yeah, I was gonna say holy.
Yeah.
It's something that was very cherished and special, and you would eat and you would rest and kind of celebrate and talk. But yeah, we're in a different model now.
Yeah.
So just everyone, please be aware of that if you've had a meal, give yourself a little bit to digest it. Don't just switch back into fight or flight. The body's going to go, okay, I guess we're not digesting. I guess we're releasing cortisol and we're doing something else.
And it's very, very easy to do that. I'm guilty of it especially around dinner time, where it's I'm often busier in the evenings. I teach martial arts class in the evenings too. And so there's often times where it's okay, dinner just got made just in time for me to eat and get out the door and do that. And so you don't you're shovel down your food and then you're off and you're and it doesn't sit well. It doesn't feel well, those types of things. But like you said, that relation to that fight or flight and that rest and digest, when you're interrupting systems in your body, whether it's the nervous system, digestive system, hormonal system, all those different things, man, your body struggles with those disruptions.
Yeah, because it's trying to do what it thinks you want it to do and what it thinks is right and proper. It's like a good puppy, and it's trying to do what you want it to do.
And you kind of need to train it. You need to, and that's probably a good place for us to start to wrap up is, when we're looking at these hormones, all these hormones that we've talked about, and we look at these core actions, find a way to balance those core actions and make it sustainable, because this is another argument against extreme changes, is it's hard on your body and you need to kind of ease your body into a proper balance.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it just comes down to figuring out what works for you, tweaking your schedule, setting a routine that has sleep and wake cycles, a routine that has a few healthy options for this is what I eat for breakfast. So the decision making and the stress isn't there in the morning. It's you eat Greek yogurt and chia seeds with fruit and granola in it because you have 6 jars in the fridge and you made them on Sunday. And it's establish a routine it's streamlined and it's simple and it's doable. I'm going through this right now. I'm creating I wouldn't say a new routine. I'm improving upon my old one, and make an Excel spreadsheet that shows when you work out, so there's no confusion about it. It's oh, I see it's here and it's here and it's here, and those are my workouts during the week. And and I think that's a really good start.
Yeah. I think this, we've touched on a lot with some really important bullet points of hormones and stuff, and I know you could talk for days and days on different hormones and stuff, but I think these ones are some of the big crucial ones for looking at weight gain, weight loss.
So I hope you learned something today, everyone out there, and that it's changed your thinking a little bit about how to treat your body and what your body's trying to do for you. Treat it like that. Treat it like the puppy, and you don't tell the puppy to sit and then tell it to do something else, and let it do what it's trying to do. And just remember, if you are noticing that things are off or things don't feel quite right, then there's professionals that can help you, professionals like naturopathic doctors like Dr. Riley, who can help you test for those things and really get a full focus on what actually is going on here. Exactly. Test for it and then develop a plan to improve it. And deal with it. There is hope.
Awesome.
You can do it.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining this episode again. Hope you learned something. I hope you're able to take some value, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode.
Thanks so much. See you next time.
See ya.